is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, and as of today, an Active Minds Hero Award winner, Taylor Nolan. Taylor is a mental health counselor and advocate who recently appeared on The Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise. Before her appearance with the Bachelor franchise, Taylor completed her undergraduate studies at Stevenson University in Maryland, where she was an Active Minds chapter member. She went on to earn her Master's of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling from Johns Hopkins University. Today, Taylor will share with us her story of initial interest in pursuing mental health as a profession, her experiences as an Active Minds chapter member, how her time on The Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise challenged her mental health, and what she's doing now as a mental health advocate. As a young adult herself, Taylor has made inspiring efforts to promote and advocate for mental health awareness through the use of her public platform and through her personal and professional efforts. For this, we are excited to present Taylor with the Active Minds Hero Award.
Thank you guys so much. It is such an honor to be here. Did not ever expect at the beginning of starting my journey in mental health that I would ever be here accepting such an award. So thank you. When I first got the email actually to come here and do this, I cried and was in such disbelief and so incredibly humbled. It's honestly a privilege to be here today with all of you, and thank you for choosing to spend your time here with me today. Before I get started and talking about some of the points that Laura just mentioned, I want to kind of talk a little bit about how I actually got here today. So when I first read my introduction, what Laura just said, because I was like, oh, I want to know everything that's going to be happening to prepare myself, I have to be honest, I got really uncomfortable reading part of my introduction. I learned I was going to be talking about why I got into the field, how being on The Bachelor challenged my mental health, and how I'm going to use my platform going forward. Can anyone in here guess which part of that introduction made me feel uncomfortable? Anyone? Bachelor. Yes. How it challenged my mental health. I'm a professional, actually. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm totally fine. I don't struggle. I don't know. I don't need to talk about that. That was my voice when I first read my introduction, and I was in a little bit of denial. There's a little bit of shame and stigma talking, and I took a second and was like, where is this voice coming from? And I was like, oh, yeah, because the show challenged my mental health. That's why. So maybe I should talk about this. And I wanted to hide again, and I wanted to get really small. I wasn't sure if I wanted to take the risk in being vulnerable and coming here today to share this with you guys. And so part of how I actually got here, sitting with you today, is reminding myself of a really important message. I'm sure it's one that you guys have heard before, something I've told my friends and family and even clients throughout the years. And the message is that you are enough and you matter. And the truth is, we are all enough and we all matter. And sometimes that's really hard to believe about yourself. That's why we have to literally repeat it over and over, and sometimes out loud, and to really check in with ourselves and our mental health, and that's kind of why I'm here to talk about that today. So again, thank you all for being here with me as I share part of my story with you. So I'm going to first touch on how I kind of got into the mental health field. I kind of had this curiosity to learn about people and how to help them. So can I have a raise of hands of how many people in here know someone who has struggled with or passed away due to substance abuse? Whoa. Okay. Thank you guys for sharing that. And that's a large part of the reason why I entered the field. In my early adolescence, I watched several family members pass away from substance abuse, including alcohol, which for some reason, because it's legal, we don't really consider a drug at times. But watched this completely tear my family apart. And it's hard to talk about now because now my family's here, and I don't think they knew I was going to talk about this. But really saw how substance abuse impacted my family. And this part of my family is Italian, so stereotypically, we didn't really talk about anything. Everyone kind of isolated themselves, and there was a lot of arguing, and people just weren't connected. They weren't talking about anything. And that was really hard for me growing up and knowing that this is something that could have been prevented, and how could that have been prevented? Who are the people that are helping prevent this? And, that was kind of also a personal moment for me where I realized, drinking isn't really for me. So made that personal choice to not drink. So I went on to pursue psychology and counseling as a career to make my living and, in turn, live my life connecting and helping people struggling with their mental health to learn how to help themselves. So I went on to get my bachelor's in science and psychology in 3 years, and then went straight into my master's degree in 2 years. So I was very young, and it doesn't help that most of the time I look like I'm 12 years old anyway. I look very young. So one of the things that I found I struggled with the most as a young adult, both in the educational setting and in a professional setting with mental health, is this notion of having to prove myself as a woman, as a young woman, and as a woman of color. So I had to really learn to trust myself and just be outspoken to kind of earn this sense of respect and value when it came to working with clients and colleagues and sometimes even peers. But a large part of how I got through kind of that struggle of having to prove myself was through using my social support. And a large part of that was being involved in different clubs throughout school, and one of those was actually Active Minds. One of my favorite things that I actually did with Active Minds, we wore these Stigma shirts. So each shirt had a different disorder written on it, and mine that I wore said depression. And one day, we would all wear them and literally change the conversation about mental health on campus. So it was really powerful, and one of my favorite things I did with the chapter. But along with struggling to prove myself at this time, there was also a lot of exploration and identity. How many of you guys are students here today? Okay, like early 20s? Okay, yeah. So at that time, I was in my early 20s. I still am, right? I'm 24. I was in my early 20s. I was interested in modeling. I was passionate about rescuing animals. I was super into eating organic and working with local farmers. I was putting my heart and soul into a dying relationship, actually. I'm half black, half white, and so I was working on some self-esteem issues that were coming up from being bullied when I was younger. I was actually working as a promo girl at a nightclub in Baltimore City, and I was in school to become a therapist. So there were a lot of different things happening during this time. And towards the end of my graduate schooling, I was like, do these all fit into what being a therapist looks like? Is this okay? And came to the conclusion that no one is perfect, even as therapists. And that last part was especially important. Even as therapists, you don't have to be perfect. I realized I didn't have to just be one thing. I didn't have to fit into this little box of what people think you should be as a helper. And I became to really dislike boxes. It's if anyone tries to put me in a box, I'm kicking that box right open and let me be me. And was really just working on embracing all parts of myself as a whole human being. And even if those parts contradict each other or don't necessarily make sense together, that's okay. They all make up who I am. So I kind of want to transition a little bit. This is where at the end of my graduate schooling, I was working in private practice, mainly focusing on vulnerability with clients and really getting into like the deepest parts of who we are as people and why we are the way that we are. And this was kind of when I started this journey towards exploring myself and doing my own self-reflection, especially in terms of how vulnerable I actually am in my life. Which brought me to this moment, made me think of Tom. Tom was in my group counseling course in graduate school. This was a very intimate course. And he said to me, he's like a really straight shooter kind of guy. He was like, Taylor, you're really good at like getting people to open up to you and getting to know them, but you really don't let anyone get to know you. He was like, you think you do, but you don't. And immediately in my head, I'm like, what? You don't even know what you're talking about? You don't know me? And then I was like, that's what he's talking about. Yeah, he doesn't know me. That's right, okay. And realized that serves me well in my career, but not necessarily in my personal life. So, again, was kind of on this journey to like explore vulnerability, was in therapy, was journaling, but most importantly was exploring vulnerability in terms of dating, which is super fun. And that's kind of when the opportunity to go on The Bachelor came up. I was recently single, I was dating, I was in Seattle, and the opportunity came up, and I was kind of like, this would be pretty unconventional and a little out there, but I don't want to look back and wonder, what if? I didn't want to not do something just because I was really scared and wouldn't have any control over how it would turn out. I was reading a lot of Brene Brown at the time, and I was like, this is my chance to dare greatly. I'm going to go on this TV show. So I thought, what better way to challenge myself and being vulnerable than to go date a stranger on a national reality TV show? Great idea. So being on the show itself was challenging for everyone in different ways. For me, it was a big challenge in leaning into the discomfort of my feelings and my surroundings. Had to really learn to embrace being vulnerable with the other girls in the house, being vulnerable with the lead, and being vulnerable with producers, and also knowing I was going to be vulnerable with like all of America. And most importantly, I had to let go of this notion of any control over how things would turn out, and embracing that uncertainty, which really expands outside of that experience and into life in general, which I'm really not good at because I like to know everything. But then, you kind of move, once you're off the show, there's this period of time when you go home and you're waiting for the show to air, and that's kind of when I started to realize this might be one of the hardest things I've ever done. The anxiety really starts to set in. Every Monday is a roller coaster. The show airs on Mondays. You're talking with the girls for hours on the phone, you're talking with the producers for hours on the phone, trying to figure out how is this going to play out, what parts are they going to put in, what parts are they going to leave out, and most importantly, but also maybe not most importantly, what will America think? What will people think of you? So, where my most challenging part came from the show was when I started to read the comments on social media. I was told even before the show, don't read the comments. Then on the show, I was like, afterwards, don't read the comments. Then afterwards, don't read the comments. But I read the comments. I read the comments on every social media page. I read every article that came out. I really wanted to know what everyone thought. And the interesting part of that is that only the negative actually stuck. There was positive, but all I heard was the negative. And it felt like every negative comment was a person right here, and right here, and right here, and right here, yelling these comments in my face. And I'll share like 2 of them throughout this time, but it became an attack on my career. So I want to read one comment that said, "I don't believe it's a smart move to go on a dating show and flaunt around in your bathing suit when you're a mental health counselor with a master's degree. How are you supposed to expect your clients to keep professional boundaries when they know what you look like half naked?" Another person commented in response to that comment and said, "So mental health counselors can't wear bathing suits now? Interesting." So it brought up this discussion of what a mental health counselor should look like. And again, it got me thinking back to all the same stuff that I kind of struggled with before even going on the show. Feeling like I need to prove myself, that I am a professional, like I'm a woman and I want to explore these other parts of myself, but I'm also a professional. I would just kind of get sucked into this black hole of reading these comments. I would lay in bed all day. I didn't really sleep very much, and if I did, then I slept for longer than I should. I would wake up immediately and look at my phone and read comments, and then I would be starting my day off just crying for hours. I totally isolated myself from friends and family. I totally numbed my feelings with TV. I don't drink, so I was just like binge watch Netflix all day. And was incredibly scatterbrained. I couldn't complete any tasks. I was already in therapy beforehand, just for like emotional maintenance stuff, and then afterwards I was like, okay, I really need this now. So I was in therapy 2, sometimes 3 times a week while the show was actually airing, and then in the month or so following the completion of the show. And I started to believe all of the negativity, and that became my inner voice, and it made me really start to question, I'm being judged as a counselor in a personal setting. Why is this? Another comment, someone said, "I feel like you follow people around and write notes about them and watch them all day. You're freaky." I'm like, this is what people think a therapist does? Like, these aren't my clients, what? And another person responded to that saying, "One thing I don't understand. You were not on The Bachelor to treat anyone. People are criticizing you for that, but I don't understand why. You weren't there to treat people. You were there as a normal human being, and you were real with everyone. If you were made to treat everyone as you do your clients, that would be literally impossible." And now when I read that, I'm like, voice of reason. But at the time, that just went straight over my head. And I'm sure as many of you know, when we discuss mental health, language is so important. When we talk about someone who has schizophrenia, they are not a schizophrenic. And throughout this journey, I think that the same thing applies with the people working in the field, the helpers. I may work as a therapist, but I am not only a therapist. These labels that we use for ourselves sometimes really stick and can be used in harmful, judgmental ways. So I would get comments like, "As a counselor, you'd think that she'd blah, 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 blah." And people saying, "You ruined your career the second you went on that show." And, if anyone here knows Brene Brown, she refers to this as a vulnerability hangover, and that was 100% what I had. And I don't even know what a real hangover feels like because I've never even been drunk, but I was like, this feels like what a vulnerability hangover would feel like. And then, taking a step forward from that, it took a lot of therapy and a lot of writing and exercising and using my social support. But even then when the opportunity to go on Paradise came up, I was still dealing with a lot of anxiety and was super resistant to anything positive coming my way. I ended up in a relationship from that, and even that whole way, I fought the whole thing. So I was like, oh, this is positive, and I don't really know how to take that in now because all I've taken in was the negative. But honestly, I feel like my most important takeaway from being on the show is that stigma around mental health is really real. Throughout school, we would talk about, the stigma. We want to break the stigma. And even here at this conference, we want to break away at the stigma. And what even is that? The stigma around mental health is really that there's this shame and disgrace associated with talking about anything related to mental illness, anyone struggling, and even the people involved in helping. It's like this concept of, when you see your teacher, like outside of school at the grocery store or something, and it's like really uncomfortable, and you're like, wait, you have a personal life? I don't know how to understand that. And that's kind of what I realized that the nation had with mental health counselors and the helpers in the field. I'm not sure if anyone in here has heard of this phrase. Can you raise your hand if you have? Has anyone heard of humanitis? Thank you. So when I was in my first internship, I heard one of my mentors use this phrase, humanitis. And she was using it when she was talking to a client. She was kind of like giving her crap for having a hard day. She left her notes somewhere and, was just kind of frazzled. And the client was giving her much crap for it, and she was like, you know what? I'm suffering from humanitis today, okay? Give me a break. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting that she would say that. It's like she's using this phrase to try to humanize herself to a client. And that's, when all this stuff happened with the show, I thought back to that, and I was like, yeah, there's actually a real reason for that phrase. That we have to remind people that even as helpers and even being a part of the field that we're human too. And, it's hard because in society, in the greater picture, we're held to a very different standard. Again, this box that we're supposed to fit in of what we think a therapist should look like. It's like, I think once you go through schooling and you have this title that now you have this innate set of skills that you're going to use in every situation you're in, with every single person you meet, in all situations, no matter how subjective you are. And that sounds a little impossible. I can't think of anyone that is able to do that. You'd be like a robot or Jesus. And again, when you think about this box and this notion of what you're supposed to be as a therapist, that is, again, another struggle and identity that then I started to face. And I wonder if you guys have faced or will face. But at the end of the day, again, this thought that I keep going back to is we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect as helpers, and we don't have to be perfect as people. The concept that it's okay to not be okay. I was really silent when I was struggling, and I didn't feel that I had the support or the confidence to speak up for myself or to really talk to anyone. So I'm incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to do that now, kind of for the first time publicly. So I thank you guys for giving me the safe space to do this. Using this platform going forward, initially social media was a very scary place for me, and now I'm working to use social media as a way to, one, advocate by helping provide resources, and two, by helping normalizing the language around mental health. Giving more of an authentic picture of my life and practicing being vulnerable on there, even though that's terrifying. And hopefully at the end of the month, I will be launching a podcast called Let's Talk About It, where I'll be talking about different mental health topics and hoping to normalize the language even more. So I'm super grateful for this Bachelor experience, even though it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life and experience. again, I kept telling myself through struggle comes strength, and it's okay to not be okay, and that you matter and you are enough just as you are. No matter your position as a helper or as a person, we have to keep talking to each other about these things. In reducing the stigma, we eliminate this notion of us versus them. And we remind ourselves that we're all in this together. We all struggle and we can all rise, but we have to do it together. So thank you guys so much for listening to me talk. That's the end of my talk. I think we're going to start a Q&A. If you guys have questions, you can write them down on your thing, and then I think we're going to start with questions.
Yeah, if you have questions, write them down, hold them up by your ear. And I actually have one to start us off.
Yeah. Okay.
So Taylor, you talked about exploring your vulnerability. What advice would you give to someone who wants to explore their vulnerability and become more confident?
Yeah. First, I would say start small. Start wherever you feel the most comfortable. It actually reminds me, I just posted something a few days ago talking about like a small insecurity that I had and wanting to be vulnerable with that. And I was then judged for it not being a substantial enough vulnerability, so it wasn't powerful enough. And I say, screw that. I think start wherever you feel the most comfortable and you work your way up. It can be as small as raising your hand in class and sharing your opinion. Yeah.
All right, we have another question over here. Someone would like to know, what was the most unexpected lesson you learned as an advocate?
Oh, that's a good one. The most unexpected lesson I've learned as an advocate. Partially because I think I've been in a little bit of a bubble, but I think I was really surprised to know that, what we use in our language in the mental health community is not universal to the rest of our society, if that makes any sense. Like emotional intelligence, that not everyone understands what that is. And I guess I was kind of in a bubble, so some of those things came surprising to me. Yeah.
So I have two kind of similar questions. What kind of advice would you give to someone as a future clinician? And a second question of what kind of license do you have in LPC, LCPC, et cetera, and what kind of clients do you see?
Yes. So the second part of that question, so I went on to become an NCC, which is a nationally certified counselor. I got that through taking the NCE, the National Counseling Exam, after I graduated. And usually people work towards their hours first and then take that exam, but I took the exam first and then was working towards my hours in Washington State. And so the licensure is a little bit different out there. I think here it's like a LCPC or LCP. And in Washington State, it was a LMHCA, a licensed mental health counselor associate. So I had that licensure for a year, and then I did not renew it because all of this stuff was happening. So right now I just have my NCC, and when I did work with clients, I never really worked with children. I worked with young adults and like middle-aged adults, usually focusing on again, kind of what I talked about, like the vulnerabilities and the core values kind of work. Before that, I did work with substance abuse, doing group counseling in an outpatient setting, but it kind of got a good mix of things, I feel like, from both working in private practice and then also in community mental health. And I don't remember what the beginning part of that question was.
All right. Someone would like to know what helps you begin again once you've accepted it's okay to not be okay. What's your self-care?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, someone would like to know kind of what helps you begin again.
Begin again. Okay.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's talking to someone. Once I reach that point where I'm like, things aren't okay, I don't feel good, I'll reach a place of acceptance within myself that that's where I'm at. And usually I'll try to move through it on my own if I can. And if it feels like it's too much and I'm really going into a dark place, I will go through my list of people on my phone and go down the list and call each and every one, and hopefully one of them answers. And if one of them doesn't answer, then my place to begin again is through journaling. Yeah.
So what are the challenges you faced as a mixed woman biracial person in the workplace, if any? And do you feel like being biracial helps you in your career field?
Yes. So my ethnicity is very vague unless people actually know what I am. So it actually worked to my benefit working with clients because people would usually just assume I'm similar to them. People would come in the wintertime and be like, oh my God, how do you maintain your tan all winter? I'm like, because I'm black. But thank you. So I think it definitely helps that people can really tell. Once people make the assumption that you're similar to them, then they feel more comfortable to open up. So I experienced it being a positive thing with clients, and then with some coworkers, there was some difficulty there at times. But, with the clients, it actually worked to my benefit just because it's very vague. People don't know. They think I'm just tan. Yeah.
We have one person wondering if you've ever felt like in the mental health field, professionals are held to a standard of having perfect mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I mean when I talk about, kind of like we're supposed to be this robot of objectivity and compassion and selflessness, and that we're supposed to always be in the right state of mind. Otherwise, how can you help other people? That's kind of the phrase that always gets thrown back at us, I feel like, is, well, if you're not good with yourself, how are you going to help someone else? And that's where, the truth of it is, you might have, a good day, you might have, a good week, but we always all have our things that we're working on, and that doesn't mean that you can't still offer help to someone else. Obviously, check in with yourself, talk to someone, be actively working on yourself so that you are able to be more receptive of, your triggers and whatnot when you are working with clients. But we're absolutely held to a completely different standard of having to be perfect and knowing how to handle all situations at all times. Yeah.
I have a question in a similar vein here. As a counselor, how do you take care of yourself in self-care / what's your favorite self-care method?
Yeah. My favorite one is snuggling with my cats. They fill up my piggy bank so much. Something as simple as taking a bubble bath, watching Grey's Anatomy with my mom, exercising. I like to rollerblade a lot. I don't like to do exercise that feels like exercise. Journaling, I journal a lot. I think it's really important. I don't know if you guys understand or have heard of the concept of the emotional piggy bank, but making sure that your emotional piggy bank is full is really important. So even if I'm just going throughout the day and I'm like, if I call this friend or if I hang out with this person, is that going to give me energy or is that going to suck the energy out of me? And that's another form of checking in with yourself on self-care. Yeah.
Great. We had someone share that they've also been on the receiving end of hurtful comments on social media, and they're wondering what you think the best way to respond to this kind of negativity is and how to kind of stay on the high road without becoming voiceless.
Yes. That was a very difficult challenge for me. I didn't respond to any of the negative comments that I received. I had the opportunity to respond to some of that at the reunion show, which didn't go so great. But I think there is a way, and now I kind of do that. People will, it's not as negative as it was, but someone will make a comment like, what was the one? Someone will make a comment about like, oh, don't sell out on every product, doing paid posts on Instagram. And usually that would be something that would be like, oh, that like hurt my feelings, and like that I don't know how to respond to that. And now I feel more confident and kind of clapping back at people, and I'm like, well, yeah, I have student debt and I need to pay off my loans, so you would do the same thing if you were in my position. But there's a balance, and I think oftentimes you can take the high road by not responding and speaking out in other ways. You don't necessarily have to respond back to that specific comment, but your next post could be something that is standing up for yourself against that comment. Yeah.
How do we begin to challenge the harmful language around mental illness?
Yeah. Talk about it. We always have to talk about it. It's harmful and it's really hard sometimes. You just got to break through that, icebreaker, I guess, of that discomfort of how do I help normalize the language around mental health, and how do I help people use it in a more positive way and not in a harmful way. And I think, again, the more that we open up and are vulnerable with our stories and share our struggles, that can't be used to hurt us anymore. Yeah.
All right, we have a few folks who are wondering, they would like to hear a little bit more information about your upcoming podcast. Let's talk about it. And they're also curious what your next steps in career in mental health advocacy may be.
Yeah. So the podcast, I'm planning for the end of the month. But yeah, so it'll be called Let's Talk About It. And first episode will be on emotional intelligence. And from there, plan on it just covering different mental health topics. And even, at times probably recap Bachelor and other stuff like that. But it'll be through the lens of breaking down the stigma around mental health. So I'll also be taking suggestions for episodes of stuff that people want me to talk about and want to join in on a conversation on. So on my social media, there's an email link, and you guys can certainly write me emails and write, what you'd be interested in hearing me talk about, things that you feel like aren't necessarily out there in the public eye that you feel like should be. Yeah. I think we have room for one more question. Yep. Yeah.
So somebody asked, how has Derek affected your journey?
How has Derek affected my journey? He, first of all, he's wonderful. He was supposed to be here today. Wasn't able to, but I'm going to see him tomorrow. He has been very patient with me and in understanding that the show was a very tough ride for me. He was not initially a fan of mine, and we didn't like each other when we first met each other. But he has been so patient and understanding with my struggles and all of this. I was extremely resistant to him, and it was very hard. When you're on the show, it's kind of like this alternate universe of your life. And then for him to transition into my real life, into the real world, was quite an adjustment. But he's incredibly supportive and has definitely helped me have more of a positive outlook and helped me have more confidence in coming up and doing this today and talking about stuff. And he's definitely a big cheerleader of mine, and I really appreciate that from him. So, yeah.
Thank you. And we actually have one comment that is not a question.
Okay.
It says, Taylor, not a question, just a love note. You are brave and fantastic, and I bet you are a lovely therapist. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to get a group selfie. I'm going to selfie all of you in the background. I think I got it. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.